to the Wine of Wellness Week. We are live at World of Wellness. I am Jamie Dorley, the host of the roundtable today, with the co-host of the Jamie and Joe show, the one and only Joe Messino. And Joe, we have a special guest zooming in all the way from Salt Lake City.
Love it.
I have quite a few friends out in the Salt Lake City area this week. Yeah, some are in Utah, some are up at Jackson Hole skiing in Wyoming. Everyone's having a party out there. Meanwhile, we're holding the fort down here, Joe. Someone's got to do it.
Somebody's got to do it.
The good news is today we were here live till 5 o'clock. What they call at Dr. Purdy's a half a day at the Wellness Center. So we'll be here till 5 p.m. And we are live, so you can come in. We got a lot of people here right now. And what do you get when you come in for free, Joe?
Oh, boy.
We have any food for these guys and girls?
We got free lunch. We got free samples. The smoothie bar is always open. And Santa Claus is usually walking around with a bag of goodies for people that come on in. So,
although we can zoom
I'm
around,
jealous. Next time I'm coming to you.
Yes, come in live next time.
The last person said that actually showed up this week.
Yes.
So be careful. Because if I could, I would actually zoom you in for a free sample of our chocolate-covered strawberries.
I got to tell you, I agree with the GOAT, Mikey G, best yet.
Wow.
Absolutely. Beats Purple Haze.
So I got some new flavors going out this week, Dr. Purdy. So we don't want to hold her up anymore. She's so kind and generous with her time today. We really appreciate it. Coming all the way from Salt Lake City, Utah. She's a clinical director and marketing director for allergy research. And she works with a close personal friend of ours, of course, Michaela Donofrio from Brooklyn.
And a few of them out there. Dan Maller. We know Dan very well. So there's a few of them.
So welcome to the Wellness Week. We do these Wellness Weeks 5 times a year. The reason we do them, this is the legacy of the late, great international icon, Dr. James Weiner.
Yep.
And the whole idea is have a wellness experience, and it all starts with the education. And I know you want to dive in right away. So before we do, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got here today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Dr. Meg Purdy, as you said, and I am a naturopathic doctor who specializes in chronic fatigue, which encompasses a lot of things. But I founded the Holistic Health Center of Dallas, and now I work in scientific education, like you said, for Allergy Research Group, and help with a lot of our supplements and education across the states.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. Allergy Research is another one of our partners at the World of Wellness. We have so many great top, what I call professional brands.
Right.
These are not brands you go to the GNC or Dr. Google or Dr. Amazon. These are really prescribed by healthcare professionals. And we're really blessed to have her joining us from Allergy Research because it's a formulation that we carry here. It was Dr. Weiner approved, of course. So if we got through his approval, you know it's a good company. So we're real excited to have her on today.
Yeah, we were talking to Michaela quite a bit about, making sure somebody was going to be at the Wellness Week to represent Allergy Research. And she said, you got to have Megan. We said, okay. Show us why, Megan.
All right. Let's see here.
I know you mentioned chronic fatigue, and I love your approach because Dr. Weiner always says, don't run for the cure, run for the cause. I know you focus a lot on the cause. So we're excited. Thanks again.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thanks to you guys again. It's nice to be here. What's that?
No, again, I'm sorry, people.
Oh, okay. It's really nice to be here. I love what you guys do for education. It's obviously a passion of mine. It's where, I've centered my career around. So I love that you guys kind of have that passion as well and share that with your people. So I love getting to be here for Weiner Wellness Week. And like I said, I'm a naturopathic physician that has always specialized in chronic fatigue. And in doing that, I sort of get a mixed bag of patients that are struggling with all sorts of ailments. Like sometimes they'll have no idea what their ailments even are, but they come to me and they're like, I feel awful. So naturally that started to bring some Lyme disease patients to my door. Lyme patients, they can really go through the ringer. It's a condition with some pretty diffuse symptoms like chronic fatigue and joint pains. So there's often a misdiagnosis or a difficult path to healing just because so many docs don't really have a big understanding of this condition unless they really specialize in it. So early on in practice, when I was fresh out of med school, I would say, I'm Lyme literate enough to know that I'm not quite Lyme literate, which is, the industry lingo for, do you treat Lyme disease, right? It was so specialized. And I felt really out of my comfort zone with this particular ailment. But then my own mom had some major health issues and spent a couple of years trying to find answers until she eventually was diagnosed with Lyme disease and started her journey. And so this became a subject that was really near and dear to me, that I was constantly researching, not just because of her, but because after seeing everything that she went through, I could really see the desperation in some of my patients. And I was always trying to help them mitigate their symptoms and eradicate their Lyme, and do some of these things in a holistic and integrative way. And I could see how much a lot of them were struggling. And it ended up being, there were so many different botanicals and so many things that I wanted to bring in, that some of these patients would be on like a million different pills, and it was so hard and so confusing. And that's just not my style medically. And so I'm really excited today to share with you guys some formulas that Allergy Research Group has created in collaboration with Dr. Darren Ingalls. He's a wonderful Lyme doctor. I've learned so much from him along the way. These formulas have made a huge difference for me and some of my patients. So I'm excited to share them with you today. They make things a lot easier, and I think they're absolutely wonderful.
It's interesting, the personal connection, because when people have a family or a personal experience, the passion gets elevated, and the depth of the knowledge becomes incredible. So I'm excited for this.
Makes a big difference.
Yes, it's absolutely different, because, I see things firsthand with her, not just outside of that hour I get in the treatment room, right? I see what she's going through at home all the time, so it made a big difference to me, and it kind of guided a lot of this research. But today we're just going to go really quickly through how Lyme works, because I know some of the viewers might not be really familiar with Lyme disease, and what makes it such a hard issue to treat, and why it's one of those diseases that's created almost its own specialty. But we're also going to highlight some solutions, both to disease management and symptom management, which are equally important factors when a person is suffering, right? And we're also going to take some time talking about some of the common challenges with Lyme treatment. The most common of those is going to be Herxheimer reactions that can bring about a lot of pain and negative symptoms with treatment. Anyone with Lyme disease is probably really familiar with that word, but we'll go into a little detail about it. And we're also going to talk a little bit about biofilms, which make Lyme infections in particular really difficult to eradicate. So let's get into it, and we'll explain some of those words for those of you who might be a little less familiar. So quick historical recap. What happened in the beginning of the discovery of Lyme disease as we know it is a lot of children, a lot of kiddos in the town of Lyme, Connecticut, started to acquire this really strange sort of rheumatoid arthritis symptom picture. And all of a sudden, a lot of children in the same area are acquiring what we think of as an ailment for old folks. So it's significant. People are going to look into this. Researchers are looking into this. What is going on? Everyone's paying attention. And eventually, a researcher discovered that deer ticks in the area were carrying a specific spirochetal bacteria called Borrelia burgdorferi, or it wasn't called that yet, but it was discovered by Dr. Burgdorfer. So it eventually became known as Borrelia burgdorferi, because that's how it works, right? You discover it, you name it. And that infection was making these kiddos, and it turns out the adults too, but people weren't, as shocked by that, sick with an illness that affected multiple systems and had a really strange presentation. So Lyme is a tick-borne illness, or at least it was discovered as such. There's some evidence that Lyme can be carried in other organisms like mosquitoes. There's also many co-infections that travel in these ticks, and other infectious species can cause Lyme as well. But for simplicity purposes, we'll kind of talk about Borrelia the most today. And because of these Lyme origins and its strong prevalence in the Northeast, where you guys are, some people will even falsely believe that Lyme disease is only an issue in this region, but that's actually completely untrue. I've seen Lyme disease instances all over. People travel, bugs travel. It's how it works, right? It's growing incredibly rapidly. We're seeing more and more cases in more and more parts of the world. And unfortunately, because of multiple factors that affect our world today, we're seeing more and more people with symptoms of persistent Lyme, or we'll commonly refer to this, we hear it referred to as chronic Lyme disease. And this is where people will feel symptoms and ramifications of Lyme for much longer than the course of a cold or an acute illness. And many can suffer for years. And there are a lot of people like even in the medical community who are still unaware of this possibility. But it's becoming really, really prevalent. So how does Lyme disease work? Well, someone gets bitten by a tick, and what we say is if they're in a medical textbook or if they're doing things the way they're supposed to, they're going to get an acute presentation of Lyme, meaning they're going to feel sick. They'll have extreme fatigue, they'll have body aches, they'll feel like they have a bad flu. Neuropathies are really common as well. So we'll see numbness and tingling and nerve pain, maybe even symptoms of Bell's palsy, which is like a facial paralysis. And one of the symptoms people know of the most is what we call a bullseye rash. And it's a rash that kind of looks like a dartboard. It's got 2 red rings with a white central clearing in there. If you see a rash that looks like a dartboard, you got to get to the doctor immediately, because that means Lyme disease, right? But a lot of us that treat Lyme and work with it know that this is not always present. As a matter of fact, I would say, it's hard to tell how often this is present, but I think most of us in the industry would say about 30% of the time is how often we see these. So it's not that common. So sometimes these things can fly under the radar.
Megan, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
How long of a time span between the bite and the symptoms? Is it a set time, or is it always different?
It varies. It really, really varies. So most commonly in the classic presentations, right, what we're going to see in the textbooks is you'll usually get symptoms they'll say about a week after a bite is when you'll start feeling that within that first time. Okay. But I've seen these come on a lot later. Or what I see most often is people have no idea when they've gotten bit, because your ticks are they're the size of a poppy seed, and they like to hide in your skin folds and places where you don't really notice, right? So people will never even know. And they're just like, oh, I'm super sick. I have no idea what's going on. So that's really common as well. And then we have persistent Lyme, which is a little bit different. And this occurs when these Lyme spirochetes aren't eradicated. They hang around in the body because they've got some pretty tricky mechanisms that help them evade our immune system. But they have an affinity for nervous tissue, cardiac tissue, and muscle tissue. Like they can hang out, hide, go into a dormant state, and then be reactivated at some point due to another infection that monopolizes the immune system, or an environmental trigger, other poor health factors, a lot of stress, a multitude of things, right? Or they just feel like it. So the symptoms are different and diffuse among different people, which is also what makes this tricky. But the most common ones are going to be joint pain, fatigue, cognitive issues like not remembering things or taking a long time to grab something from your brain that you know is right there. It's like, we'll see cardiac issues like palpitations. And these people will just feel, you think of all of these symptoms, right? They'll feel really bad. They'll have no idea why, and it'll go on for a while. And eventually they'll go to the doctor and they'll say, I just don't feel right. I'm tired. I can't remember things. My joints are kind of achy. And sometimes these people will get a response like, so do I. It's because we're getting older, right? And they're like, no, this is different. This is different. And so sometimes these people will end up on really long searches for answers and diagnoses. And some people are like, how does this happen? Why is this spirochete so tricky to our amazingly evolved human immune systems, right? How do we get an infection, maybe even take 2 weeks of antibiotics, and then the bug lives on? Well, bugs have been around longer than we have. So they might even be smarter than us. Jury's still out on that. And they're tricky. These spirochetes are tricky little buggers. They're super shape shifters, right? So they can become whatever suits them at a particular time. And for Borrelia, you can see on this slide, you can see several shapes here that are common for these guys to take on. So they have the corkscrew spirochete form, and that's what allows it to burrow into tissues. It's like a little corkscrew, and it can just burrow into where it wants to go. It can penetrate different cells and find its little home. And it, like I said, it loves that nervous system tissue, but it can go other places as well. And it's difficult for the immune system to detect these as spirochetes. It's possible, but difficult, because our immune system likes to see, the rods and the cysts and those kind of things, like it's a little more used to. These can also spiral up super small into a cyst form and become dormant, meaning they're not really doing anything. They're just hanging out, minding their own business. So our immune system doesn't really see them in that form, and it just passes on by, nothing to see here, and allows it to hide out. And so here we'll see in the A slide, we'll see that uncoiled active form, and then we'll see it in different stages of coiling up. And in the C picture, we see another powerful mechanism for Borrelia in particular, but several bacteria can do this. You'll see there's a little arrow pointing there, and that's that little tail thing is the presence of biofilm being laid out. And it's a very important factor when treating Lyme. It makes it very difficult to treat, that we're going to kind of touch on it a little bit.
So you said, I can't believe you used that term, shapeshifters. That's so.
I've been watching Encanto with my kids, and there's a shapeshifter.
Yeah, I was just wondering. You think these little things may be aliens? I don't know. They're supposed to be shapeshifters too, right?
Right, exactly. That's what I always think of, that character whenever I think of Borrelia. So maybe that's where it came from. But the infection goes from your bloodstream to multiple tissues, right? So the tissue that Borrelia decides to invade in one individual versus another can vary, which is why we see a bit of variance in symptoms from one person to the next. But what's interesting about Borrelia is that it's a very slow growing organism. Most bacteria in our body are replicating every 20 minutes or so. And some of them that are considered more slow growing will replicate more like every 8 hours. That's a slow replicating bacteria. And Borrelia replicates every 1 to 16 days. Holy cow. So when we're using antibiotics, most of them are targeting bacteria during the replication cycle. That's how they work. That's how they kill them. And that's why we don't just take, one antibiotic and go on about our lives. You get, a bacterial infection. You take your antibiotic for a week or two, make sure it's in your system while the bacteria you're fighting is replicating. Boom, we got them. Great. And, we go on. But it's with Borrelia, it's very possible to take antibiotics for 2 weeks and never see Borrelia in its replication stage if it's on kind of a 16-day cycle, which is kind of insane, right? And so I think that can contribute to some of this evasion. So let's get to some more fun stuff. Is there a natural approach? What can we do about this? Yes, there's stuff we can do. And when we take a holistic approach, we want to make sure that we're seeing this person as a whole rather than looking at them like they're a disease and just kind of checking boxes, right? That's what we do at Weiner. That's what we do, when we're trying to treat someone from a holistic perspective. So when we're looking at Lyme, we're going to have several goals. And for me, first and foremost, it's to help them feel better and get their quality of life back. We want to reduce inflammation. We want to make them feel better. We want to reduce pain. We want to stimulate the immune system and fight off the infection, but also protect against autoimmunity, which is a little tricky. And if we had more time, we would go into a whole hour-long discussion on Lyme and autoimmunity. But for today's purposes, we'll just say that the two often travel together, as Lyme can be a trigger for some common autoimmune diseases. And Lyme itself also has some autoimmune mechanisms. For instance, there's a protein on the outer surface of the Borrelia. You go back to the slide, if you could see the little protein on the side, which you can't, called OSPA. And that protein tricks our immune system into attacking our own joints, which is where those arthritic conditions and connections come into play. So it has its own autoimmune progression as well. So how can we set up the system the best? How can we support the important actions of the immune system and get immune cells where they need to go while still minimizing that autoimmunity? Those are the goals. So we're going to go through some of my favorite botanicals and natural approaches while kind of talking about some of the corresponding formulas that you can get at Weiner or from Allergy Research Group. We send them there to sort of connect how to use these products to your advantage and really understand where they shine.
Okay.
All right, so let's start out with antimicrobials. They're the star, right? We've got a microbe that's causing us trouble. Let's bring in some antimicrobials. There's some great antimicrobials out there with an affinity for Borrelia, but the great thing about the herbal approach with antimicrobials is they often will have multiple properties. So they can be immune supportive and anti-inflammatory. So there's a million botanicals with antimicrobial properties out there, but we've really chosen some that we think are perfectly suited for the Lyme patient or the tick-borne illness patient. So first, we're going to talk about the ingredients of our flagship, the flagship of our tick-borne illness group, the Phytotech Defense. And the purpose of this formula.
Who picked that name, Megan?
We did as a team. We had a spreadsheet, voted. It was
Great name. All right.
It was a team effort where there were a lot of jokes along the way.
I bet.
But the Phytotech Defense, the purpose of this formula is antimicrobial and immune boosting. So it's intended and formulated to be effective against the Borrelia spirochetes specifically, but also some others that are common co-infections. So let's just jump forward to some of these ingredients because this is the fun stuff. So cat's claw is the first one here, and cat's claw is just a standout for Lyme. There's no way around it. If you ask 100 docs what botanical comes to mind when they're thinking of Borrelia, cat's claw is going to be number one on the Family Feud board. Okay, it's what everybody's going to think of, and there's good reason for that. It's a really strong antimicrobial with a strong affinity for the Borrelia species. And it also has actions against many of the common co-infections that we'll see with Lyme, like Babesia, Bartonella, Ehrlichia. Lyme patients or people familiar with that will know some of those. Its antimicrobial action comes from its POA content, and this stimulates the immune system. And I do see, because of how powerful this particular botanical is against Lyme and its co-infections, that Herx reactions, which again we're going to talk about a little bit, can be common with cat's claw. So we've got to be ready for that as well. Spoiler, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But the great thing about
question, Megan. Quick question about cat's claw.
Yeah.
First question. What was the date of the first actual Lyme disease discovery?
In the 70s, as far as I know. Yes.
Okay. And cat's claw's been around. Cat's claw's been around a lot longer than that.
Way longer than that.
Right. So it had a lot of other uses prior to this. Right.
Absolutely. And I still use cat's claw for things that are non-Lyme related. This is not like a specific botanical that we only use for Borrelia. So it's got that antimicrobial action, but it also it's a general antiviral. So it's good against a lot of other viruses, but it also has pretty strong anti-inflammatory actions. It can bring down some of those inflammatory cytokines that we see really common in a lot of these infections as well. So I've used cat's claw in some inflammatory conditions that have no infection present, like IBD or those kind of things as well. Artemisia is another standout here. So artemisinin is the constituent that is drawn from Artemisia that's very well known worldwide as an anti-malarial. It's the first line treatment for malaria worldwide in general. It's what you'll see if you look, what am I supposed to do if I get malaria? Artemisinin. The researcher who discovered its effectiveness against malaria, she actually won a Nobel Prize, and I love her. I always give her a shout out because she's a female researcher in natural medicine that won a Nobel Prize for just an amazing thing that did a lot of good. So that's wonderful. And there's a ton of research available on Artemisia along with malaria and its mechanisms against malaria. And Babesia, which is a really, really common co-infection that travels with Lyme, is a very, very close cousin to malaria. They're very, very similar. And there's also some research on Artemisia with Borrelia specifically. One in vitro study showed Artemisia even has activity against Borrelia when it's in that stationary phase, which is wonderful. It means that timing is not so much of an issue that needs to be circumvented. And I think that's a really cool aspect of Artemisia in particular. And another cool aspect is its immune function. Artemisia has the ability to down-regulate or suppress the production of autoantibodies, or those autoimmune antibodies that we don't want, right? This is so, so important. So we're not just here to throw a bunch of kill, destroy herbs and everything, right? There's a lot of repair that needs to happen, and autoimmunity is a very common issue with these Lyme folks. So Artemisia has that balance there that brings a lot of beauty to the formula. Hetunia is the next herb we're going to talk about. It's got a very long history of use in Chinese medicine against leptospirosis, which is not a huge issue in our culture today, but it's also a spirochete with very similar mechanisms to Borrelia. So some Western herbalists might not be as familiar with Hetunia, but it's very, very common in Chinese medicine. The name always makes me think of my grandmother because she's always like, oh, she's such a hoot. My grandmother's Southern. I'm Southern. And she's like always saying, oh, we're just hooting and hollering over here. And so I always think of Hetunia as like this fabulous old lady in like a big Sunday hat, just like my grandmother. But so when I think of her, I think it's like she's got all these antimicrobial effects and she does all these wonderful things. But she's also special in that she helps to enhance our immune barriers in all parts of the body. So she can effectively, I call her a she because she reminds me of my grandmother. I don't know the, the gender of this plant. I think we probably have both there, but she basically blocks the way in, right, for all of these pathogens. So resolves infection, protects against recurrent infection, and also has action against biofilms, which is so important in persistent infections. And again, we're going to talk about this later. It's a little out of order. But biofilms are basically a protective little cocoon that microbes can create to protect themselves from our immune system. And breaking this down really gives some of these herbs that we're using better entry. So breaking that down will give Hetunia more entry, but also that cat's claw more entry into the microbe that it's trying to get to, the Artemisia and some of these others that we're talking about. So they blend together really, really well. Coptis is another ingredient here in this formula. It's a great antimicrobial. It's really high in berberine content, and berberine it's present in a lot of antimicrobial herbs that have that rich yellow color. You can see on the picture here that rich yellow color. Golden seal is an herb that's really high in that berberine content, and we think of that for antivirals, right? And the reason I like to highlight Coptis as an antimicrobial for Lyme specifically is it also has neuroprotective qualities. And like we've mentioned, a lot of our Lyme patients are going to have strong neurological symptoms. So we're getting in here with some antimicrobial actions and some nervous system actions, and we're getting a 2-for-1 deal with this one.
You don't have a cute story behind this name?
I don't have one. I could come
you
up
don't have
with
an
one
uncle
really.
that was a cop or something, maybe?
This one must have not been as hard for me to remember in school or something.
Okay.
I had to come up with stories for some of these when I was a student. Mnemonics. Alrighty, let's move on to medicinal mushrooms, which are my favorite thing to talk about. We can never overlook the power of mushrooms.
Yes.
I love this formula. We bring in herbs, we bring in mushrooms. I always say mushrooms and garlic are like nature's gift to us in our health. There's so much there. And cordyceps are they're very, very rich in those beta glucans, which are the compounds in mushrooms. They're present in all the mushrooms that give them all of that immune power that we know mushrooms to be so powerful for. And they're very rich in this particular mushroom. So those beta glucans, they can really upregulate our T cell and our NK cell activity, which are specific immune cells, and not just boost their numbers, but they can also increase their activity and their efficacy. So we're not just getting more of the T cells and the natural killer cells, but we're getting more powerful T cells and NK cells with stronger activity. They help them put up a better fight, which is wonderful. And there's also research that cordyceps can improve outcomes with lupus patients, which is an autoimmune disease, because it inhibits the production of anti-double-stranded DNA antibodies, which are autoantibodies that are a hallmark of the autoimmune phenomenon. So basically, this mushroom also has some anti-autoimmune benefits too. So we're boosting the immune system we want, inhibiting the undesirable actions. And cordyceps also, I've used it outside of Lyme very frequently because it has a really strong anti-fatigue action. Adenosine is one of the constituents of cordyceps, which is obviously directly related to ATP. It's the A
I did not
in
know that.
adenosine triphosphate. Yeah. So that's why in chronic fatigue patients, this mushroom can really boost that energy function. So I'll use it in a lot of infectious issues like EBV that are common with chronic fatigue. And then last but not least in this formula, we've got lion's mane, and it's not here for its antimicrobial properties per se. It's here because it's a neurological powerhouse. So I'll reach to lion's mane for memory issues, sensory issues, nerve damage, neurological conditions. It's one of the great options out there. And how it works is it's actually there to help remyelinate damaged neurons, which is amazing. Like we said before, these Lyme patients have a lot of neurological symptoms because Lyme, that spirochete, loves to invade that myelin that kind of protects our neurons. So we'll often see some of those neuro symptoms, and lion's mane comes in and it helps kind of repair that myelin that's been damaged and bring those back to life. So I love these. I think lion's mane mushrooms are delicious in a stir fry. I get them from a farmer's market, but I think you have to eat a lot of them to get the medicinal qualities. So I personally opt
Is
for.
that what they look like?
So they can look like this, or some of them don't have these little stringy hairs on the top. Some of the ones I've gotten have been just kind of a plain all white mushroom. And it's great because they don't have that strong mushroom flavor, which I love, but I know a lot of people can have issues with that. They don't have a slimy texture or anything. They really soak up any flavor you put them in. So a little garlic and thyme with these in a stir fry, and they really shine. I think that's a culinary tidbit. if anybody's,
we love those. We love those. Anything involving garlic, yeah.
Right?
But I do a lot of cooking. When people ask me how much garlic do you put in, and I say I start with a bulb,
Exactly.
a whole bulb. I don't use cloves. I start with a bulb.
You measure it with your heart, not with a recipe when it comes to garlic.
Yes.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit about supporting the mitochondria, because these mitochondria can be particularly sensitive to damage in these Lyme patients. So it's very important to consider mitochondrial support. If we teleport back to high school biology, remember mitochondria is where we generate energy for the cell. So if our mitochondria is damaged, our cells aren't making energy, you're going to feel crummy, it's going to be awful. And this is a part of the reason that a lot of Lyme patients will have some of this chronic fatigue and cognitive deficits. So the intention behind the mitochondrial cofactors formula is to support the mitochondria. Not much mystery there. We did the same naming activity when we were naming this one, and that's what it does. But what's important to note is that this product doesn't have to be Lyme specific. I've used this outside of infections when someone needs mitochondrial support, like chronic fatigue patients can really benefit from this. Some with cognitive deficits as well, I've used this. So anytime we're needing to get a little mitochondrial boost, I think this one is a great one. But we've got it in our Lyme quad because it's really important for these Lyme patients. So some good options for mitochondrial support. CoQ10 is an absolute must when we're talking about the mitochondria. It's the electron carrier in that electron transport chain, again, with the trauma of high school biology for some of you, but that Krebs cycle, if it's all coming back, all you need to know, CoQ10 is a vital enzyme for that to take place. When we don't have CoQ10, we'll feel fatigue, we'll feel muscle aches, we won't have energy and strength. And so we really, really need it to get that back, right? I always
How much CoQ10 is in this, Megan? How much CoQ10 is it?
We have got, let's go back to, I don't know the number offhand, but it's on one of these slides. I think it's on the last slide where the amounts are, the little things.
No problem. Yep.
But what I was about to say is you need a lot of it to get stuff done, which I think is where your question is coming from. There's a lot of formulas out there that'll be like a little smidge of CoQ10 and it's not very bioavailable and you won't even get any of it. And CoQ10 is one of those supplements that's really important to not just, grab whatever brand at Costco. You've got to get a really high quality bioavailable CoQ10. Absolutely. We use a crystalline free form of the ubiquinol form of CoQ10, which is highly bioavailable. And it's really important to kind of look at those things. So if you're shopping at the Weiner Wellness Center, the folks there can help kind of guide you on CoQ10s if you're just getting a CoQ10 separately, I assume. Yes. Carnitine we know of as a fat shuttle, right? So it gets fat into the mitochondria so they can create our energy. So it brings our fat in, it gives the mitochondria a nice little snack, and they turn it into some energy for us. How kind. Love that, right? B6 and magnesium are cofactors for everything metabolic. We can't do anything without them, and they're involved in ATP production, so they've got to be present. And NADH is here. It's a form of niacin or B3, and there is so much evidence that's continuing to pile up about the importance of NAD and brain function and mitochondrial function, neurological function. It's involved in just about every process in the body, and we can't function without it. And I mention it here because when we combine NADH with CoQ10, we'll see big boosts in mitochondrial function when we use those together. And the research shows that when we combine these together clinically, we'll improve multiple aspects of fatigue and endurance when they come together. They do really well with Lyme patients, fibromyalgia patients, anyone who's got kind of that extreme fatigue or mitochondrial damage.
Okay.
And I put so much, I was trying to cut down on slides. I put so much on the last slides, I couldn't fit my references. So I put them over here. But now I'm seeing them on the screen and they look tiny. So I apologize for that. So up until now, this all is pretty straightforward, right? And then it's like, why is Lyme so challenging to address? Well, there's challenges with the autoimmune piece, the long-lasting symptoms, cognitive protection, some of those things we've talked about. But one of the challenges that I think is probably most familiar to Lyme patients is the Herxheimer reaction. Gerst Herxheimer is the official name. Patients will know it as a Herx or a die-off reaction. That's the cool lingo if you want to sound cool in the Lyme clubs. And these can be really debilitating for the patients. Like I've seen some literature refer to these as, a small inflammatory response or something. But clinically, I'll see some patients with no reaction whatsoever, and then some with debilitating Herx reactions. I mean, they'll be like in bed, unable to work, in extreme pain, like they have the flu, essentially. So
are these usually quick acting reactions? These are not delayed, right? These are immediate.
Usually very quick acting. What I see the most is when you change someone's antimicrobial and you bring on a new one within a day, people are going to start experiencing this most often is what I'll see.
Okay.
And the other major challenge is biofilm management. So biofilms we kind of touched on it, they're this bacterial defense mechanism. And I describe it as this slimy barrier that the bacteria makes. And it's almost like a slimy house to hide in from all of our immune cells. And it's also how these microbes communicate with each other. So basically, it's a mix of extracellular DNA, proteoglycans, and carbohydrates that all goop together and make this slime. So in the lab, if you're growing like a biofilm producing organism and you streak it on the plate, you'll actually see like tons of slime. It's very visible. Lyme is a really good biofilm producer, which is a great defense mechanism for them, great evolutionary mechanism, not so great for us when we're trying to get them out of our system. So yeah, exactly, right? To put this into perspective, we'll see research shows that when biofilm is present, it takes 250 times the antibiotic load to kill off that microbe. So when we're trying to eradicate an infection and not just coming at it successfully, we're trying to figure out how are we going to get through this biofilm so that our stuff is working, because otherwise it's just kind of sliding off there.
How long have we known about these biofilms?
I don't know. I've known about them since I've been practicing, but I haven't looked into how long we've really, really known about them. I think we've known about them for a long time, and it's taken a while to sort of figure out what to do about them, right?
Right.
Yeah. So in these next slides, we're going to talk about our Herx formula and the biofilm neutralizer. But these two are how I know this 4-pack was created by a few docs who actually treat Lyme disease in their real practice, because it's such a well-rounded group. And these are kind of the 4 main points that we want to get to. So here, these are their taglines on this slide, but we'll get to know them much better as we kind of look through what's in them. Okay. So how are we going to bring? Here we go.
Yeah, we'll be putting an order in for this one, Megan. No problem.
Yeah, right. I love this one. I thought the same thing when I saw this, because before I was using kind of all these things separately to try to do biofilms, and I love that it's all together. I love this formula. So how are we going to break down these biofilms? It's not like you just pop a balloon and then it's gone. You got to kind of dissolve it bit by bit and work your way in there. And to do that, we're going to need some sort of proteolytic enzyme in the mix. We need something to sort of break down that protein matrix. And that's where serrapeptidase comes in this formula. It's going to be at the top of this list. In the research, it can both enhance the activity of the antimicrobials or antibiotics being used, and that's because it breaks down that biofilm. And it also inhibits new biofilm formation. So it's effective against both the emerging and the mature biofilms. So you think of it as like a little drill that kind of drills away and makes an entry point for the antibiotics you're using, the antimicrobials you're using, Phytotech Defense you're using, whatever it is. And it also has, just as a side benefit, an analgesic effect, which is not the intention for this formula, but it's kind of a welcome side effect for some of these Lyme patients, The next one here we mentioned is EDTA. I think most people might think of that one as a chelator because that's what it's famous for like metal detox and stuff, because it draws out those cations. But here we use it because it loosens the bonds between calcium and alginate, which is a key polysaccharide in this biofilm matrix that we see. So, think of the biofilm matrix, everybody's kind of linking hands. EDTA is like that person that's so good at Red Rover on the playground and they can just like bust through those strong linking arms. That was never me. I always hated that game, but there was always a kid that was so strong and could do that. And it was like the ringer on the team. So let
me ask you a question real quick, if I may. The EDTA orally for chelation, very controversial.
Yes.
Does it work? Does it work orally? Is it, obviously it works better intravenous. For this purpose, you're seeing a good reaction, or it's working efficiently, not like for chelation.
Absolutely. So this is not, like I said, this one's not really formulated for chelation or heavy metal detox. Right. I wouldn't recommend using it for that. And we use the calcium disodium form, which helps prevent against, there is some talk that EDTA can leach calcium a little bit. So we put a little bit of that back in there by using this form. But the way it's dosed in this formula is intended to sort of break apart those bonds in the biofilm matrix. We're not going for a chelation or pulling out metals or anything like that. So it's in a much safer dose. Trypsin is another proteolytic enzyme. It's similar to serrapeptidase in its mechanism of action. It digests a wide range of substrates, including some of these bacterial proteins. And it's been shown to sort of reduce that viscosity of the biofilm matrix. So it can kind of loosen it up a little bit, loosen its attachment to the tissues. So, serrapeptidase is drilling in, EDTA is red rovering, breaking our bonds, trypsin is loosening things up. And then we put in alpha lipoic acid here, which is more there for its antioxidant power. When we're fighting biofilm, we want to have an antioxidant on board because oxidative stress promotes biofilm production. So these microbes, they love all of that oxygen. They just start laying down their matrix, and keeping oxidative stress low will prevent their ability to create new biofilms. So we're breaking down biofilms and we're preventing the creation of new biofilms.
I like the choice of alpha lipoic acid in this formula. I think it because it is the only one that's both fat and water soluble, and so you're going to get your biggest bang for the buck. Good choice.
I love this formula, and I'm so glad you were enthusiastic about it too. I was so excited. I saw this coming to light during the process on the vacuum.
I mean, I don't see how we can't order Phytotech Defense and biofilm breakdown. That's got to be a 1-2 punch. We got to have it.
They're such unique formulas, and I love them together. They work so well together. All right, so let's talk herxing, which is just such a huge hurdle for some of these Lyme patients. These reactions can be anywhere from just like, I don't feel so great, to holy cow, I cannot get out of bed. And those that are on the more extreme side of the spectrum need a little bit of support. And we know that because of Lyme's replication cycle, that treatment can sometimes be extended. And some of these patients will just be like, I can't deal with the Herx reactions. I don't want to treat my Lyme anymore. So it's really important to have something there that can be helpful to get them through that and get them to where they want to go. So as far as Herx reactions go, I've tried a lot of things over the years to mitigate these reactions for people. They're really hard to prevent when you're going at these infections really hard. So it's more about mitigating the symptoms. And I've used a lot of things, and different things have worked for different people. But the two things that I think have been pretty universal as far as mechanisms to mitigate these reactions have been strong anti-inflammatories and pH balancers or alkalizers, essentially. And as far as anti-inflammatories go, we all know curcumin is the standout. We've all heard of it, right? But you have to take a lot, kind of like CoQ10, you've got to take a lot of most curcumins on the market to get anything out of it. So you want to make sure it's from a very bioavailable source. This is another one of those supplements you're not just going to want to go grab off of Costco. You want to get a high quality one. You want to get a professional grade one, like the ones that you guys carry. The quality of curcumin is really, really paramount. So some supplements, it's just whatever, and this one's not the case. We use in ours, Curcumin is the name of the brand, which is proprietary curcumin, and it has a patented mechanism for delivery, and it tests in clinical trials, I think, at 72 times more bioavailable curcuminoids than standard curcumin we're going to see over the counter. So you actually get your curcumin on the label with this one. It's not, which I love. This curcumin is obviously a really strong anti-inflammatory, but it's not just for pain. I think we think of anti-inflammatories for pain just because of the pain inflammation narrative. But in this case, it's also because when they're herxing, they're going to be feeling the release of these pro-inflammatory cytokines that have been triggered in the die-off, right? And curcumin especially has specific activity against those pro-inflammatory cytokines to kind of bring the body back down to a normal state. So yes, it's going to help the pain, but it also helps to kind of resolve this condition a little bit quicker. Boswellia is.
We're familiar with curcumin. It's a great ingredient, curcumin.
It's so wonderful. So wonderful. Boswellia is a great sister to curcumin. They just boost each other. They work really well together. I often use them together because so many formulas nowadays have these two together for good reason. They're great together. And bicarbonates help to maintain a proper acid-base balance. And we know that more acidic environments can trigger more pro-inflammatory cytokines. So we're just trying to support this balance and make an environment where these pro-inflammatory cytokines don't last very long. They get out of there. So even if we herx, we get through it really, really fast, right? And that way we can make these reactions a lot more tolerable and a lot less severe. So to recap, because I know I said a ton of words super fast, these are two of our formulas, 2 of the 4 that I'm so excited to have in our line now. There just aren't a lot of formulas out there that are organized in this way. And they've given me such a good starting point with my patients where they're not taking a million pills a day and it's so confusing and difficult. It's kind of all in one place. Phytotech Defense is the formula that we're aiming to kill the bugs with this one. We've got the cat's claw, we've got the lion's mane, we got the Artemisia, we got the medicinal mushrooms, we've got it all in there, right? And they're present to either strengthen our immune system or help eradicate infection. And I mean, this formula was created specifically with Lyme in mind, specifically with Borrelia in mind, but I've used it with some other chronic and stubborn infections as well that I like the formula for. And then the mitochondrial cofactors, mitochondrial support is paramount to Lyme treatment. So we created a formula for it to be a part of the Lyme package because we've got to support these patients. A lot of patients will get through a Lyme treatment and they'll be like, okay, I've tested negative, everything's great, but I still feel I have no energy. I can't remember anything. I feel awful. They need that mitochondrial support, and that's where it really comes into play. And then the Herxheimer Support, great ingredients, high quality curcumin. It's great support for those Herx patients. And the biofilm neutralizer is probably actually my favorite of these 4, even though I think Phytotech Defense is the star. It has all of those proteases we talked about. So it sort of helps to dissolve that biofilm, gives the Phytotech Defense the entry that it needs to these wily spirochetes. So I love to have it on board when I'm working with Lyme because it's just such a major part of the treatment and it just makes things easier and more effective. So Thank you guys so much for having me. I love working with the Wine and Wellness Center because I think we just jive so well on our passion for education and high quality products and all of that. So
Oh
it's
yeah,
always great to be
absolutely,
here,
Megan.
guys. Thank you so
Pleasure to
much.
have you. I mean, yeah, I like I said, I bugged Michaela uh, over and over. I said, "You guys got to come and do a workshop. Come on, get out here," because I wanted to get someone here live, originally. And then and she said, "Yeah, well, me and Dan want to both come out." And I said, "Okay." And then she said, "Well, Debbie wants to come too. Debbie Boutar. I know all of them from my days back in Douglas Labs and throughout the years. And Dan Maller, you know Dan Maller, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, right. So Dan actually worked for me at Douglas Labs
Oh,
years
no
ago,
way.
many years ago. Yes, yeah. And I tried to hire Michaela many times. It just didn't work out. But it's all
So
family, it's all
Taylor, that's
community,
my
and we all work
friend.
together. And then, it was great to bring some of the allergy research products in here. And now we're definitely going to pick up two more, the Phytotech and the biofilm from this presentation. So thank you.
Wonderful. It's so great to be here. And next time I want to come in person too. Don't just invite Michaela. I'm coming too.
You're on. That's it. We want you here in person. We'll have a crowd here. We'll have people watching, and it'll be a blast. You got to do it.
Wonderful.
Next Wellness Week is in May, so we'll
Cool.
even be snow free. I hope in May. But
Perfect.
you guys
I
should
like
try to
that.
come. Okay.
Okay.
Keep in touch with Phil for the schedule.
I will do that.
All right. Great. Thank you, Megan. Megan, this has been a real pleasure. Great having you from a fantastic company, Allergy Research, Megan Purdy. So we'll see her again soon, I'm sure. Guys, that does it for the third day of the Wellness Week. We just finished up our Tuesday edition of the workshops. We'll be back again tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. We'll be kicking it off with, oh my God, Dr. Len Bransowitz is going to kick it off at 9 tomorrow. Don't miss that one. We'll see you then. And remember, all of these workshops are available on the World of Wellness Facebook page, World of Wellness YouTube channel. They're there. They're archived. You never have to miss them. You can watch them as many times as you like. So then we'll see you tomorrow from the Weiner Wellness Center, the World of Wellness Center, Weiner Wellness Week. We'll be back again tomorrow. Thanks for attending. See you soon.